Hey, hi, hello. It's always so awkward starting videos. Saying hello to my phone, it's very uncomfortable. So if you ever notice that like my intros are very awkward, that's why, because I'm sitting here, I've sat down, I've checked the focus, I've done all of the things, I've gathered all the materials, and then I sit, I hit record, and I go, hey. I'm not really good at small talk in regular life. I find it very uncomfortable and annoying. Like, I'm like, can we just get past this? That was a huge digression up front, but hello, hi, welcome. I am here to talk about all the books that I read in March. Full disclosure, I am filming this on March 30th. Tomorrow is the last day of March, and it is also the last day of my work, and I'm so very excited. I read quite a number of books this month, some awesome reads, and I'm so excited to talk about them. Okay, I'm just referencing my beautiful, look at this spread. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but oh my gosh, the spread for March in my reading journal is just like, well, probably one of my favorite spreads I've ever done. I love it, it's beautiful. And I read 7 books this month. So in no particular order, let's dive into it. Let's talk about the books I read. I hope you're cozy. If not, get cozy. And cheers. This is the most springy mug that I have. I know it's black, but I'm not gonna change. The first book that I read this month is The River Twice by John Bemrose. This is Canadian literature. I actually got this book this year. I know I'm on a book buying ban, but my best friend surprised me. I went up to Ottawa for my birthday, and she surprised me with like a little bookstore tour all around the city. And at one of the stores, I was like, you know what? Why don't you look for a book and you find me a book that you think that I would like, and then, you know, I'll get it. She ended up buying it for me, but I didn't present it that way. And so we were looking around and we found this one. And if you know anything about me, you will know how much I really enjoy studying World War I. I have a very deep reverence and appreciation for World War I, and I've just always been interested in it. And so this book actually is set in Ontario. It is set in Southern Ontario, which is where I live. And it takes place in the I think it is after World War I. I think the war is over in this book, but that doesn't really matter. What happens is a young man named Ted returns home, and he is suffering from PTSD, and he returns back to his family, his wife and her family, and essentially tries to like be normal again. The thing that like ultimately sold me on this book, and also my best friend, is the last paragraph of the description. It's very Megan. It is so Megan. Let me read it to you. The River Twice does for Canada what Pat Barker's The Regeneration Trilogy did for England. By the way, the Regeneration Trilogy is phenomenal. I'm gonna reread it this year. I love those books so much. It focuses our collective memory on moral injustices that attend any war. John Bemrose draws readers in and won't let them go until the last page of this astonishingly lyrical and deeply humane novel. I'm gonna pause for that. The novel moves back and forth between the landscape of Southern Ontario and France. Not as much as I want it to be honest. It says that on the back, and I was really enamored with that idea, but it didn't spend as much time in France as I kind of wanted it to. The things that I liked about this book, it was incredibly well written. The writing is beautiful. I really like the descriptions of the landscapes that we got. I think also the descriptions of PTSD. You would be in a scene with Ted and you'd be following along, and then all of a sudden he would just stumble back into a memory, and the way that it was written really felt like you were stumbling along with him. It was really shocking and powerful, and I really enjoyed that part of it. I also enjoyed some of the characters. One of our main leads, Miriam, I believe is her name. Yeah, Miriam. I really liked the character of Miriam, and felt like the approach to Miriam was really nuanced, because she is Ted's wife and she is so happy that he has returned from the war, and in so many ways she wants life to go back to normal, but she also is deeply patient and aware that it can't go back to normal. Her character was treated in a very sympathetic, nuanced way. Now, what did I not like about this novel? So ultimately I gave this 4 stars. I feel like that was probably a little bit generous, but I loved the descriptions of the battle towards the end of the book. There is a battle. It takes place in Passchendaele, and it is phenomenal. It's so good and riveting. But I didn't love this book as much as I wanted to. I think that there were characters that were problematic, but there was also plot lines that felt odd and out of place, and also problematic in their own way. Some of the choices that Bemrose made I found interesting in terms of the plot. I think that where this book really fell apart was the kind of plot of it, because the entire book is so tense, and that is done really, really well, that the plot felt a little bit ever so slightly contrived. But I still gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I still would recommend it in the space that is Canadian war literature. I think that it is it's worthy to be included in that, I think. Moving on from that one, because I stumbled my way through that. Ooh, let's just talk about, I'm just gonna talk about the big thing that happened this month. Oh my gosh. Let me try that again. I'm gonna talk about the big thing that happened this month, which is that I finished the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I read The Two Towers and I read The Return of the King, so the last 2 books in this trilogy. I flew through them. I really, really enjoyed them. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. I think that I am so glad that I read this trilogy. As I feel like I've said in my last wrap up, I've never read The Lord of the Rings. I read The Hobbit growing up. I've read that book a number of times. I will say, if I had to pick, which I don't understand why I would have to, I still think that I prefer The Hobbit ever so slightly more. Although that's really hard because I loved Sam. I just fell deeper and deeper in love with Sam, and if I were to ever do any kind of like essay or, you know, studying of this series, I would really want to focus on Sam as the idea of a hero, because I just feel like one of the most interesting things that Tolkien did in this series is he presented us with so many different types of heroes, like the actual archetype of heroes. There are so many that are in this series, and it was one of the more fun things to do while I was reading it, was just kind of pick out different types of heroes that we see nowadays in storytelling that is almost like second nature. You know, you have like the reluctant hero, you have the good hero, you have like the warrior style hero, you have the courageous, you have the wise. Like there was just so many like different types of heroes in this story, and it was one of the things that I just wasn't expecting when I was reading this. I wasn't expecting to pull anything new away from the story, and I feel like I absolutely did, which is just the best feeling in the world, and I'm so glad that I can now say that I've read the trilogy. Moving right along, let me talk about the best book this month. Let me talk about the best book this month. The Book Thief. The Book Thief, oh my goodness, I loved this book. It is the favorite book of so many people. And when I went into it, I wasn't cynical about it, but I was like, what more could be added to the genre that is Holocaust literature? And oh my goodness, I was not expecting to love this book as much as I did. 5 out of 5 stars. Feel like if you haven't read this book yet and you're interested in it and you are going at it with that mindset of like, what more could be added to this genre, you should absolutely read this book. This book First of all, I loved the writing. I know that there is a lot of like back and forth over, you know, the fact that this book is narrated by Death, and is that brilliant? Is it a little like cheesy? Like I feel like it worked really, really well. I also wasn't expecting this book to be about Germans. The approach to talking about German responsibility was really well done, and I feel like particularly there is a moment where they're in the bomb shelter, and the narrator as Death takes a step out and says, don't feel sorry for these people. And that was probably one of my favorite moments, is this exploration of the various perspectives during this time period. And I really, I could go on because I really did love this. I loved the character of Max so much, and now I want to watch the movie, but I'm a little nervous because I'm a big lover of movies, and I have heard next to nothing about the movie The Book Thief, which makes me think that it wasn't very good. I really don't know how you could adapt this story well, to be honest. I feel like the writing is what makes this book soar. It is searing and just like so painful. But I am gonna watch the movie. So let me know down below if you've seen the movie and if it's good, and like what my expectations should be going in, because did I love this book. 5 out of 5. The next book that I read, I didn't actually read, I listened to via audiobook. The other thing you should know about me, the other time period. It's not really another time period, but all things World War I interest me deeply. And particularly the Russian-German side of World War I is really, really fascinating to me. And so the book that I listened to is called The Daughters of the Dead Empire by Carolyn Tara O'Neill. And this book is set just after the Russian Revolution in 1917. And it is a retelling of the end of the Romanov dynasty. We follow Grand Duchess Anastasia. She has survived, so it's like an alternate history, and she's on the run, and she meets up with a young woman who is a communist revolutionary, and it follows them getting to know one another and all of the tension that, you know, it was kind of like a thriller in so many ways. But if I'm being honest, I'm struggling to tell you what this book is about, because that's it. That's the plot, you know, like they're on the run and you're following them on the run, and it was fine. I ultimately ended up giving it about 3 stars. I would almost say like 2.5 to 3 stars out of 5, because I really liked it because it was about this history that I'm really interested in. And I don't know if you would like it if you weren't interested in the history. If you are looking for a YA book that introduces the history of the Russian Revolution in a way that is actually quite accurate, then I would say pick up this book, because it definitely is a good way to like wade your toe into that history. It's definitely a primer on that story, and I felt like O'Neill did a really good job at, I actually don't think there was anything like historically that was like jarringly inaccurate. I mean, obviously, other than the fact that Anastasia survived, but I will say it goes pretty deep in the various ideologies that were fighting during that time period. So, you know, we had the Red Army and the White Army, and the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks. Like, it goes into the different factions and what they believe, and you kind of, it felt like there was a lot of explaining and not a whole lot of plot, which I don't fault O'Neill for, because like I said, I feel like this was a really good primer on that history. And it's hard, like it would be so hard to write this for a YA audience when I don't think, at least in Canada, I didn't learn this in like school. Like, I didn't learn this in elementary school, though I got into this history in university. So we're not really taught it. So you really do have to explain to what you're assuming is a North American audience that has never really heard much about this. Anywho, I could go on about this history. I feel like I'm not making sense because I'm so deep in the history of it that I'm just talking about it as with the assumption that, you know, you care. That's basically my YouTube video, so I don't know why I'm being suddenly self-conscious about it. I'm glad that I did listen to this on audio. I didn't buy it. I rented it through the library because it was just fine. I liked the characters. The plot was fine. Like, it was fine. I think I really enjoyed it because of the history. So if you read it or if you have read it, let me know your thoughts, because it's really hard for me to separate my love of the history with just an okay plot. I will say I am so glad that there are books that are being published more and more that are about this history, because I love this history so much. My very first book that I wrote was is a fantastical retelling of the legend of Anastasia, as well as the Eastern Front of World War I. So me here, we love it so much. So another thing that you should know about me is that I love Bob Dylan, love Bob Dylan, and I went on a little bit of a spiral into Bob Dylan again this month. I don't know why. I think he is just a comfort listen to me, and I'm going through some changes right now, and I think I just needed some kind of comfort, and so Bob Dylan it was. And so I was listening to his music and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna reread Chronicles, because I read this in high school and I know that I can get through it pretty quickly, so it's not gonna be like a massive investment, and I really just wanted a book that felt like Greenwich Village in the 1960s, and this is it. I don't recommend this book unless you are a deep Dylan fan, and even then, as a deep Dylan fan, it wasn't like super great. I give it like a 3 out of 5 stars because it's very rambly, and I find it jumps around a lot, and if you don't know what he's talking about or the time period that he's referencing, you're completely lost. There was a couple times where I was like, wait, you're just assuming that I know what you're talking about. Okay, like I guess I'll have to look up what you're referring to here. And so that was a little jarring. I will say that this is also what I like to refer to as name salad, which is just basically him talking about various people that he encountered through his life and describing them, sometimes in really fun ways and like really whimsical ways. I actually had a moment where I was like, man, I wish Bob Dylan would like describe me one day. Like, I wonder how he would describe me, because his descriptions of people are really fun. On the whole, it was just fine. Like, it was fine. It was a ride. But I still want to find a book that like is set in 1960s Greenwich Village, New York, that's kind of musical. I do have Utopia Avenue, but I don't know if that is a similar vibe. But anywho, I read that one, and I'm glad I did. It was a reread. I don't know if I'll ever read it again. The lighting is slightly different because it's a little bit later in the day, because the entire time that I was filming that, there was a truck backing up, and because I live in the city, I toned it out completely, but it is driving editing Megan crazy. So we are filming a little bit later, so the lighting might be ever so slightly different. I have exchanged my coffee for a really gross looking green smoothie, and let's talk about the last book that I read this month. Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk. I just looked that up, and I really hope that I said that correctly. So how did I feel about this book? This was ultimately just fine as well. I feel like it was the month of either like amazing or just fine. This book was ultimately just fine. It was just fine again. This book is set in a remote Polish village, and it follows an elderly woman by the name of Janina, is how I would pronounce it. This is how it's spelled, but since it is Polish, I think the J turns into a Y. It was fine. It was just fine. I ultimately gave it like a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I really liked the theme of the book, which was all about the exploration of our relationship to animals and our kind of dominion over them. And are right to their lives. And I thought that the theme was really, really interesting. It's just the overall plot. Again, I feel like this was the month of plots that just disappointed me a little bit. This book starts out with one of Yanina's neighbors being found dead, and then other villagers start turning up dead, and Yanina gets it in her mind that animals are seeking revenge on hunters and poachers, and she tries to convince the police of this. And on top of that, it also just kind of like follows her day-to-day life. I really did enjoy being in Yanina's mind, and I really thought she was very whimsical. And to be a little bit honest with myself, I feel like she could be me in like 50 years, probably. That's probably me in 50 years. However, I don't know. I felt like some of the tangents that she went on dragged on ever so slightly. The mystery didn't really unfold in the way that I wanted it to. To be honest, I found it quite predictable. And there were actually a couple passages that I did write down because I thought that they were really interesting. The first one is, we have a view of the world, but animals have a sense of the world, which I really liked that. I thought that was really good, and I highlighted it. And then this is an example of like a tangent that she goes on where it worked, and I found it really interesting, and I was captivated, and it really spoke to me. Some of them, not so much, but this one was really good. But why should we have to be useful, and for what reason? Who divided the world into useless and useful, and by what right? Does a thistle have no right to life, or a mouse that eats grains in a warehouse? What about bees and drones and weeds and roses? A large tree, crooked and full of holes, survives for centuries without being cut down because nothing could possibly be made out of it. This example should raise the spirits of people like us. Everyone knows the profit to be reaped from the useful, but nobody knows the benefit to be gained from the useless. I really liked that. And honestly, I feel like on the cusp of this life change where I'm like essentially giving up a career to start another career, and I'm going to be temporarily unemployed and, you know, just serving myself and not society, I feel like I really needed to hear that, and it really spoke to me on this cusp of change. And there were some passages that were very much like that stopped me in my tracks. But overall, I felt like the tangents just kind of went on a little bit too long, and the story took a little bit too long to get to the point. It's not even that I expect a book to get to the point. Like I've said, I really do enjoy tangents. I just feel like there was one too many. There's one too many with this. Okay, so I just reviewed my footage, and the goodbye is also just full of the beeping. I can't believe I didn't hear a truck backing up for like a good 10 minutes. It's just noise at this point. We're getting into the construction season. So that's it. Those are all of the books that I read this month. Thank you so very much for watching. I will see you in the next video.